Hello, everyone. It's time for our latest episode of the GI Huddle. Today, we'll speak with Newgioco CEO Mike Ciavarella. He'll be talking us through his career in gaming and the growth of his company, which went public in late 2019. You'll also be able to read Mike's thoughts in the cover feature of Gambling Insider's upcoming sports betting focused magazine. Hi, Mike. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Dan. Nice to be here, and I appreciate you inviting us on.
No problem. Thank you for coming on. So to start off with, could you tell us a bit about your career and your route into gaming?
Well, my career was completely on a different path altogether. I was in the financial business per se. Was a portfolio manager and account manager, things of that nature, and that's where that's sort of dovetailed itself into this business because I was brought into the company with the with my business building experience, and I never thought I'd be in the sports betting business, but here we are. My exposure to sports was my coaching background. I have a well-developed coaching background, and in the sport of ice hockey. So that's why the two dovetailed together. But it was quite a remarkable transition.
No, that definitely makes sense as a transition, especially the sports side.
Sure.
But do you think there's a lot of crossover between sort of finance and gaming?
Yeah, absolutely. If you think about it, I mean, it's very data. Both are very data driven. Sports. Used to. I mean, if you look at bookmaking itself, back in the day, it was before the internet came and everything went online per se. I mean, it was just a bookie with a book, and he would be able to take the bet, me versus you. It was essentially a competition. As soon as the internet came out, and a lot of the industry generally, kind of pushed over to the online process, then it became data driven, and it was more financial. And if you kind of accelerate or fast forward to today, I mean, how many companies are taking their businesses public? So to become a publicly traded company from a bookmaker's thinking, it's a completely different atmosphere altogether. I mean, in fact, many companies like ours, the stock price is completely disconnected from the operations. Others are going the opposite direction, but yeah, it's interesting, sort of a blend.
Mm-hmm, yeah, for sure. We can definitely talk about kind of since you've gone public later on.
Sure.
But yeah, your personal journey with the company, you joined in 2011. What kind of attracted you to the company?
Well, it's an interesting background to the whole process. Separating the founders of Newgioco and what they did in developing their business. And the founders are made up of two components: the one group, or the one family, if you will, because we're very family driven. And we've tried to maintain that culture. But the family that sort of developed let's call it the retail side, the customer facing side, they licensed themselves when the Italian government regulated the industry. And they started with 4 locations and built a phenomenal business. They have a great name, a great brand in the Italian market. The second group were primarily the technology side, where they were with another operator altogether, and conceived the new platform, which is Ellis Game Board, which we've talked about ad nauseum with a lot of folks. So that is a completely different compartment. And essentially what the two of them saw, is an opportunity to take this brand new platform and expand it around the world. But they knew that in order for them to do that, they would need some good corporate structure, possibly have to raise capital in different environment other than the Italian banking space, which is quite challenging in itself. And they ultimately were referred to me, and that's how it all came together. It wasn't me searching for, hey, why don't I get into the sports betting business? And when they first contacted me, my approach was, well, I've been down this path before. We have to prove the platform. I'm not going to go promote the stock of a company without knowing that your product is what you say you think it's going to be. So it was kind of like a two-pronged approach, or two-phased approach. The first phase was them finding me, putting their ideas together, finding me to put together sort of a corporate idea. And then me, throwing it back to them and saying, "Look, prove it. You guys prove it, and I'll take the company to where we need to take it."
Sure, it's almost a decade on from that, really, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
And
yeah.
imagine, like you said, they did prove it to you. And
Yes. Yeah.
how do you reflect on that journey since?
Well, the old adage, it's a marathon, not a sprint. That was really some of the key premises from the beginning, and not only that, I mean, we obviously set up a very global plan, and I said, look, guys, it's very simple. We start off with a main plan. And the second part of the plan is stick to the first plan. You know what I mean? Stick to the main plan. And that first plan was being extremely disciplined about, making sure that you don't get off track, you don't get too far ahead of yourselves. And the biggest, most important words were patience and discipline. And that comes from my financial planning background. Like basically, a lot of guys that, start their, they invent something, they want to get it out right away. They get very emotionally attached to that process. And the hardest thing to do is keep the horses, tight. So that was one of the things. And so the journey has been quite remarkable because obviously, the growth of the business is obvious. I mean, the numbers are to speak for themselves. And not only that, it's in a very geographically bound market, just primarily the Italian market. So the next step is to keep that journey going is now that we've proven the platform, proven the software in this very highly competitive industry, and now we could take it to, fortuitously, the U.S. market, which is considered one of the largest markets in the world, is now open up to us. And one of the things is we're not a late mover in the U.S., if I can put it to you that way, as part of our journey. A lot of folks are asking me, why did you jump in a couple of years ago? We started, like you said, 2011. We started this venture in 2013. That's when we brought all the components in, started to bring the components into the rollout. So the key was keeping everybody focused along the way, and we managed to do that. So now we're sitting here going, the U.S. market is starting to unfold. COVID has really, put everybody's lives upside down, but the bottom line is that will eventually recover. But basically, the part of the journey was, the guys understood their part, which their part was they know sports betting. They really do. It's a unique product, and we can get into that later. But they also understood that the U.S. sports betting lines are completely different than European lines. And Europe is really like a leading indicator to all other regulated markets. And, for example, a lot of things that have happened in the UK and Italy, like, for example, advertising bans. Well, there's a reason for the advertising bans, and it didn't happen just for sake of because people want to stop the gaming operators from doing business. But the bottom line is that we're sitting here with a brand new betting platform, a proven one, and to jump into the U.S. market, the guys decided, look, we have to develop Ellis in its own environment for the U.S. You can't take European platform and put it in the U.S. It just will not work. And we're seeing that with some of the gaffes in some of the events that are being posted, and they're going, oops, a mistake. So you want to avoid that, particularly in this business.
Sure, yeah, definitely a couple of key topics you mentioned there in terms of US and sure. Sports betting. But obviously, you also mentioned the pandemic. I mean, how exactly did that affect Newgioco's business across the kind of various sectors?
Sure. Well, one of the things is that it exposed a lot of the tide went out, and it exposed a lot of folks, right? So the nice thing about what our personal experience is, number one, again, taking from my financial background was, be disciplined, but also be diversified. And we weren't country diversified, okay? We weren't geophysically diversified, but we were product diversified. And one of the, you can actually see some of the historical filings. We made a number of maneuvers based on the experience of the team of the Italian market, using that as the template. And we made maneuvers to balance the book, if you will. So we had a very good balance between sports betting, which is one type of product. It's not a gaming product, you know what I mean? Let's call it the iGaming side, which is poker, casino, and all the rest of it. So we tried to create a good balance. And then after that, it was then the plan was to expand. But ultimately, when the pandemic occurred, it affected all companies across the board, not just us. And the reason why it affected us, like everybody else, is sports betting vanished, essentially. So our sports betting side dropped in terms of revenue and top lines, if you will, but also the bottom line was wiped out. We didn't have the expenses. So the other side of the equation, which was the iGaming side, is the one that carried it. Okay, so it carried our company, and it really shows that disciplined, sort of diversified approach really worked. So we really didn't suffer significant damages. We just basically go, okay, this is like, if you think about being involved in just only in the European space or the Italian space in our case, is we normally go through a summer period where we go through this cycle where there's no sports. So all that really did, COVID for us, is it shifted the summer season. If you look at the pattern, it's exactly what it did. So we were used to it in a way. But now, when soccer came back and the European sports have started to come back, we've seen that rebound, like everybody's starting to see nowadays in the U.S. So it wasn't really, it was a surprise, but it didn't adversely affect our business overall. We continued with our plan.
Mm-hmm. No, sure, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And as you mentioned, sports are back, and most recently the US sports are back.
Sure.
And that'll take us back to kind of the topic of the US market.
Mm-hmm.
You talked about the differences between Europe and US in terms of sports betting. So how has that kind of defined your approach to the market, and
Sure.
what have you done differently there?
Yeah. Of course, I'll keep some trade secrets to myself, but I think one of the key things is we first, our team, we first recognize that there is a main difference. There is a huge similarity, though. I want to qualify this. There's a huge similarity between the passion and emotion around sports in Europe, or particularly in Italy, as it is in the U.S. Like, everybody in the U.S. loves their team. You're either a Packers fan or whatever the case may be. The bottom line is that there's that similar passion. Everybody's got their logo tattooed somewhere. But what we noticed, or what we understood being in our business, is that things operate differently in terms of the business side of sports betting. Emotional sides are essentially the same. But one thing our guys were sharp on is they go, look, at the end of the day, we're a small operator. And what's important to us, what drives our business, is profitability and being a sustainable business. So that's why when they developed Ellis and the risk management side of the platform, that was critical, because that was always missing in legacy platforms. So the bottom line is that our guys said, look, before we jump in to the US market, two things have to occur. Because we started in 2013, well ahead of PASPA. With the anticipation, like the market had anticipated, there was going to come a day of reckoning, and PASPA will be either repealed or adjusted or changed or whatever. So in that case, we started planning for it, but we really couldn't develop, even though our guys said, look, when it's time, we have to develop the platform for the US. It has to grow in its own environment. So essentially, what we did was stood at the starting gate with everybody else in 2018. We had a couple of years of warm up, and then in 2018, instead of taking Ellis Euro and putting it into the US, they said, look, let's take data, because in order for us to create the product, in order for us to create a bona fide sports betting platform engine, we have to have data. You got to feed data into the engine for it to be able to react properly to what's going on in the market. So that's what we've done over the last couple of years. We've sort of looked at the market, started to understand, number one, how things are moving, how baseball lines are moving compared to football lines, et cetera, et cetera. Then we also understood how the U.S. sports bettor behaves compared to the European bettor behaves, and then created that sort of product. And before we launched the product, our plan was don't go into New Jersey and start competing, banging heads against everybody that's already there. Take a step back, prepare not only the product now that you've done that, and the next step is certify it on every single level. So the first one we just recently announced, which is GLI 33 on the core engine, the betting event engine. and the second component will be kiosk or retail, and then the mobile. We have all those components. We're an omni-channel platform, so we have all of them. So, but again, instead of jumping into our first target market is the DC market, and I'll talk about that in a moment, Washington DC particularly. But our plan was make sure that the platform is completely certified, so that if somebody comes to DC and goes, oh my gosh, that's a really nice platform, it's exactly what we're looking for, but we're way over here in Colorado. Oh, well, wait, we're not ready because we don't have the mobile certification. So what our plan right now is, let's do a full sweep on all certifications. So no matter where it is that an operator is situated, be it in New Jersey, Illinois, wherever the case may be, we're ready for it. We don't want to say, okay, could you wait a few months because, so the bottom line is that that's still our philosophy, and we're maintaining that. So again, we're not a late mover, we're a disciplined mover. And so that's the next process in terms of our deployment.
Yeah, no, that sounds like you said earlier, the old adage of a marathon, not a sprint again, I suppose.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and the kind of the progress and the growth you've talked about resulted obviously in the firm going public late last year.
Yeah.
How have your first few months been as a CEO of a public traded company?
Painful. It's in a word. Well, look, I mean, being an executive officer of any publicly traded company is always a challenge. So I mean, I have a great deal of respect for some of the guys who've done some pioneering work. But ultimately, it's been an exciting ride. I have to be honest. I mean, we did sort of we did essentially develop the company on the over-the-counter market. We gained a bit of notoriety, we gained a bit of a following, but we haven't yet, let's say, using a colloquial term, we haven't promoted the company. Generally speaking, right now, we haven't done the things that we should necessarily or would have necessarily done immediately after listing. And that was a function of COVID hitting. And I mean, it affected everybody. Like literally, we had a sequence, a plan. We're now continuing with that plan, but it was sort of sidelined a little bit. And primarily, there's no utility in marketing when, basically everybody's not sure what's happening out there. And there was no sports really. So, the first part was getting more used to, let's call it the corporate governance side of things and what we need to slot into place for that process. Because once, again, it's similar to the platform. The platform needs to be ready for the market. The product needs to be ready for the market. And so does corporate governance. We have to take a family, culture type driven company and operation and bring in somebody from the outside saying, okay, we're going to tell you what to do all the time, reporting, et cetera, et cetera. So the experience that we had in the first couple of years on the over-the-counter market was very, very helpful. Now it's a question of getting that product up to speed, which is what the original plan, and then we'll basically get the company out. And and the biggest challenge, aside from doing all those little nuances about corporate governance, et cetera, has been trying to keep the message out to our current investors. Number one, our current investors, and number two, the investors we'd like to see come into the company. So we have to keep putting that message out that this real are genuine company here to be invested in.
No, I appreciate the very honest answer there, and like you say, it's not been an easy time, especially in stock markets with COVID. That really leads me to my final sort of general question. It's going forward, what are your main plans and ambitions for the company? And you can be as broad as you like with this question, which some people love that aspect of the question, some people maybe not so much.
Well, okay, I've been honest all the way, and I try to keep that as that's the best thing to do. Sometimes a little bit too much so, but I'll try to keep the trade secrets, as I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
Well, I guess the next steps, if I could put it to you that way, obviously, our big, we have a very, let's call it aspirational, using that term that people have used lately, an aspirational and a very ambitious plan. I mean, and it's all based on the new software. The Ellis really is a remarkable platform. Everywhere we've shown it, like, they're going, wow, this is pretty cool. And again, I'm not blowing a horn. I'm just basically stating what the reaction has been. So we feel very strongly about that. And when you compare what we have, and like from our perspective, when we compare what we have versus what's around the globe, legacy-wise, or companies that have been in the space for a long time and have pioneered the industry, we feel very, very confident that if we establish a solid foundation, the right things today, let's call it the pillars of good corporate development. When we establish these, our plan is still ambitious enough to become a major global player. I think Ellis is going to be the one to watch now, and it's going to be a major deal in the next 15 to 20 years. And I think spreading around the world, becoming one of the large major operators globally, I think is something that we're planning to become.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you very much for your time, Mike, and best of luck as always with your future ventures.
Of course. Thank you, Tim. I appreciate that.
Yep. And to our viewers, thanks for listening.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you.